Hey, what's up? I think most people would assume that making a fun breakfast requires a ton of work and mess, but I'm about to prove that wrong. In this video, I'm gonna show you 5 breakfast recipes that I've designed to be delicious, not boring, low mess, and most importantly, take less than 15 minutes start to finish. Up first is minute for minute, one of the most delicious things that you could possibly cook in a home kitchen. And it's a serious contender for the greatest breakfast sandwich of all time.
The first thing I wanna do before I build the sandwich is to whip up a quick little condiment. So for that, I've got 50 grams of standard issue mayonnaise here, and into it, I'm gonna add 25 grams of Dijon mustard, and then I'll just stir the two together. This is called Dijonaise, because it's Dijon and mayonnaise, and it's gonna bring a little bit of additional acidity and a little bit of a sharpness to the sandwich that helps cut through the richness of the egg yolk and the butteriness of the brioche. I just think it's a nice to have. A lot of breakfast sandwiches skip something like this, and yeah, it brings a little bit of extra acidity. Obviously, this is a lot of sauce for just a simple little breakfast sandwich, but whenever I'm whipping up Dijonaise, I like to make a little bit more than I think I need because this stuff is really good for sandwiches, burgers, and wraps, and it stays good for pretty much forever in the refrigerator. Once I've got the Dijonaise whipped up, I'm gonna preheat a 10-inch nonstick pan over medium heat, then add in a little squirt of oil, nothing crazy. And then I'm gonna take a little squishy brioche bun and drop it in cut side down, and then slide it around to get it evenly coated in the oil, and then toast it for about 30 seconds until it's nice and golden brown on each side. That toasted up super quickly, but that looks really, really nice. I'm using these squishy little brioche buns for this because they have a higher fat content than standard issue grocery store buns, and that makes them not only taste better, but it gives them a better texture. Standard issue burger buns tend to crumble when you put any pressure on them, and I also think they're too sweet and they have kind of an off flavor. These little brioche are pretty widely available these days at most grocery stores, and they're superb. So next I'm gonna pull these out and set them aside. And then while I've got my pan rolling over medium heat, I'm gonna add in just a touch more oil, and I'll crack in a large egg right into the middle. I've got my pan turned down a little bit now to about medium low, just because I don't want the egg to bubble and spit hot oil everywhere. I'll hit that with a little bit of salt. And then from here, I'm gonna let this fry out for about 60 seconds or so, just to let that white get set up a little bit on the bottom. I don't wanna fry it too hard because the egg whites will start to get crispy, which isn't something that I really want on this sandwich because it's really all about the soft, luxurious textures. About 60 seconds later, I'll come back and crack open the yolk, then flip over my egg, and then let it cook on the other side so that the white can set up and that the egg yolk can start cooking from the bottom up. And then I'm gonna drop in 1 Kraft American single and let this coast for about 45 more seconds or until the cheese is just barely melting. And after about 60 seconds or maybe 2 minutes in total, the American cheese is molten, and now it's time to build this into a sandwich. By the way, this way of cooking an egg where you break open the yolk is really sick because it gives you this texture on the yolk that's very unique. Since you're cooking it really high and fast and on both sides, you get some set yolk around the outside, but it still keeps the middle jammy. Now to build this, I'm gonna put a teaspoon or so of the Dijonaise on the bottom. Again, this is just enough to bring a little zip to the sandwich and cut through all the rich fat. Then I'm gonna drop on 3 slices of very thinly shaved ham. The thing about thick sliced ham that I really don't like is that it has this snappy hot dog texture that really reminds you that you're eating lunch meat. Thin sliced ham, on the other hand, is very luxurious and it's so thin that it kind of melts in your mouth and it's just way more pleasurable. Next, I'll slide on my cheese egg and then top it with my toasty bun on top and give everything a little bit of squish. And oh baby, the yolk breaks. It looks so good. Oh my gosh, dude. Dude, this is just the perfect breakfast sandwich. I really feel that way. You get salty ham, zippy Dijon, runny yolk, melty cheese, and a sweet, squishy bun all in the same place. It's amazing, truly.
Up next is a faster version of Mexican chilaquiles, which if you haven't had before is essentially a mashup of enchiladas and nachos. But this version isn't as heavy as either of those, and there's fried eggs on top, so you can technically call it breakfast.
Now to make these chilaquiles, I'm gonna start by preheating my oven to 450F. At this point, if you're like, hey Bri, my oven takes forever to heat up and you said that these were 15-minute recipes, what the hell? The oven doesn't need to be at 450. It just needs to be hot enough to melt cheese, and in the time that it's gonna take to bring everything together over here, which is about 5 to 7 minutes, the oven is gonna be more than warm enough. While that oven preheats, I'm gonna make a really quick red chili sauce to coat the chips. For that, I'm gonna start with a 425 gram can of basic tomato sauce, and dump out about 100 grams or so. Getting rid of just a little bit of that sauce is gonna give me extra room in the can so that I can puree this right in the immersion blender so I don't have to make an extra dirty dish. First thing in is gonna be 40 to 50 grams of chipotle chilies in adobo, then 3 grams of chili powder, roughly 2 grams of salt, or 1 big pinch. Then this part is totally optional, but I am gonna add in a little pinch of some paprika, a little pinch of some cumin, some garlic powder, a little onion powder, and some oregano. Once everything's in the can, I'm just gonna sneak in my immersion blender and spin it up for about 15 to 20 seconds. By the way, if you're really in a rush and you don't want to measure stuff and blend it up, you can definitely get away with a store-bought chili sauce. I like the Siete brand enchilada sauce for this because it's pretty close to what you'd make yourself and it tastes quite good. The thing that I like about making it myself is that I get to control the viscosity. Sometimes store-bought enchilada sauces are too thin or too thick, and I usually have what I need in the pantry, and it truly comes together in about 2 minutes start to finish. Once I've got the sauce spun up nice and smooth, it's time to build the chilaquiles. From here, I'm gonna add in about a quarter cup or so, or maybe 2 ounces of my chili sauce into a nonstick pan that's over medium heat, and I'll just heat up that sauce real quick. That'll take less than 10 seconds. Then I'm gonna add in about 75 grams of thick, hearty tortilla chips. Then I'll just give them a quick stir to get everything combined. By the way, my preference here is for slightly less sauce than more sauce, just because I need to have a little bit of crunchiness in my final chilaquiles. If there's too much sauce, it's gonna eat a little bit heavy, and the whole thing's just gonna end up being mushy. I'll move on when the chips are relatively evenly covered with sauce, but I've still got a few here and there that have these dry spots. That's where all the crunchiness is gonna come from. The last step is to add in a strong pinch of Chihuahua cheese. Then I'll toss that in to get it evenly combined with everything. And then I'll top it with another strong pinch. In total, maybe a quarter cup of cheese. And once I've got my chips and cheese all layered up in the saute pan, I'm gonna throw it into that oven that we preheated a few minutes ago to melt the cheese for about 4 to 5 minutes or so. Also, if you don't even want to go through the trouble of heating up your oven to melt this cheese, you certainly can melt it in the saute pan on the stovetop. Just do it over medium-low and throw a lid on it for the same amount of time. Now, while this cheese melts, I'm going to use this little bit of downtime to cook an egg to put on top. I'll start by adding in a little ziggy of oil into a medium heat nonstick pan. Then I'll crack in 1 large egg, or 2 if you want a little bit of extra protein. I'll hit it with a little bit of salt. Now from here, I'm going to cook this egg exactly like I did for the breakfast sandwich, where I sear it on the first side for about 90 seconds or so. Then I'm going to break open the yolk and then carefully flip it over, turn off the heat, and cook it on the backside for about 30 seconds or so. This method is a faster, more efficient way of getting you runny yolk with fully set white. With something like a sunny side up where you have the same aesthetics, you kind of have to baby it, you cover the pan, you got to steam it just right, and it just takes a lot of attention. This is kind of a quick and dirty weekday morning method. Now I'll just set this egg aside for a second, then grab my chips from the oven. And after a quick 5-minute melt ski, these look just disgustingly good. They almost look like Doritos. Oh my God. Melty cheese, chili sauce. It's crispy and soft at the same time, which is a little bit mind-blowing. It's so satisfying. Then to plate these up, I'll just move the chilaquiles into a bowl. By the way, this is pretty easy to make 2 portions of at once. In that 10-inch saute pan, you could easily fit 150 grams of chips. I'm gonna add a little squiggy of sour cream. To make crema, by the way, I just take some regular sour cream, add a little bit of milk and a little bit of salt, and stir it together. You can also buy pre-made crema at most grocery stores. To bring just one more type of fun flavor, I'm gonna add in some cubed up avocado here. And then finally, I'll put on my runny egg right on top. And that's a very quick chilaquiles. That's just a fun looking breakfast. For a guy who eats scrambled eggs like literally every single day, this is very novel and fun, and I would be so excited to eat this, especially knowing that it would only take me 12 to 15 minutes to put it together. Guys, this just has that weird special thing that you only get from chilaquiles, where the chips are simultaneously crunchy and soggy. It boggles the mind. It doesn't make sense, but it is so delicious and so interesting to chew. Flavor-wise, you get the smokiness from the chipotle, you get the richness from the egg yolk, you get a little bit of acidity from the sour cream, and it all just comes together into this beautifully simple, hearty breakfast that is going to keep you full well past lunch.
Up next, I'm gonna show you a clever way to delete 20 minutes of cook time from one of my favorite breakfast dishes, shakshuka. But first, I wanna thank Wild Grain for sponsoring this vid. If you haven't heard of them, Wild Grain is a service that delivers fresh baked but flash frozen versions of sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas directly to your door. I love it because the baked goods are not only very high quality and delicious, but also baking them is super convenient. Everything shows up frozen, so whenever I need something baked fresh, like say a loaf of sourdough bread for a dinner party, I just toss a loaf into the oven and 25 minutes later, I've got a crusty, fresh bread that tastes like it came from an artisanal bakery. Because it did! Wild Grain partners with small bakeries from around the country, so you're not just getting some factory loaf, you're getting real sourdough and real pastries. Wild Grain really shines when you're hosting dinner parties or especially around the holidays when all of your time goes into preparing food, not baking fresh bread. So this year, I'm saving myself a ton of time around the holidays by serving their cranberry pecan tear and share rolls. If you want to try Wild Grain, use my link below to get 30 bucks off your first box, plus free croissants for life. These are actual flaky, real deal laminated butter croissants, you guys. They're very good. And somehow they're free for the rest of your life if you use my link below.
It's so flaky. To make this, I'm gonna drop an 8-inch nonstick pan over medium heat. I like a smaller pan for this because like all the other recipes in this video, they're designed for a single portion. And two, a smaller pan keeps the tomato sauce sitting deep enough in the pan to properly cook the eggs. If you don't have a small saute pan and all you have is a 10-incher, you can definitely still make this recipe, but I would say make a double batch just to make sure that you have the depth of sauce that you need to get the eggs cooked. Once my pan is preheated a little bit, I'm gonna add in a pretty generous ziggy of oil. Then I'm gonna add in about 75 grams of roasted red bell peppers. Then I'll just jump in and stir them into the olive oil and cook them for about 60 seconds to get rid of any excessive moisture. By the way, these are just standard red peppers that come pre-roasted in the jar. And to prep them, I just chop them into a small dice so that they unify texturally with the sauce. After about a minute or so, the peppers have this nice savory smell and all the moisture has been cooked off. So next I'm gonna add in 200 grams of tomato sauce, or tomato puree would also work. Then I'll add in 75 grams of chunky standard issue salsa. I'm using medium heat salsa here because I don't want it to be too spicy. Once the tomato stuff's in, I'm just gonna add in a little pinch of salt here, maybe 2 to 3 grams worth. Then I'll add in 5 grams of sugar to balance out the acidity from the salsa. I'll add in 2 grams of paprika, 2 grams of ground cumin, 1 gram of coriander, 2 grams of garlic powder, and a strong pinch of black pepper, or about a gram's worth. And I also want to mention that if this is a weekday breakfast, definitely don't measure out your spices on a scale. That's going to take a bunch of time and it's going to add resistance, and the likelihood of you making this recipe falls down to basically 0. So I would recommend measuring out the tomato stuff is important because those ratios really do matter. But when it comes to the spices, I would just say go by feel and add in the amount that feels right to you. Once that's simmering, I'm gonna give it about 3 to 4 minutes to cook it down until it's at a point where it's thick. I wanna mention that I'm using the salsa and peppers here as kind of hacks to make this sauce taste better, faster. I really like the salsa in particular because it has tomatoes, onions, garlic, and jalapenos that are all pre-cooked. And then of course the roasted red bell peppers have this nice, sweet, smoky char that brings a lot of flavor with 0 effort. And after a quick 3 to 4 minute sizzle, when I come back and check on the sauce and pass my spatula through it, you can see that it leaves a sturdy trail. That's how I know that the sauce is thick enough to contain a raw egg. Next, I'm gonna lower this heat all the way to low, then use my spatula to carve out a couple of 2-inch wide wells. Then I'm gonna drop in my eggs one at a time, carefully. There we go. And then I'll season the eggs with just a little bit of salt. And you don't have to do this, but it is bonus points if you want to sneak a little bit of the tomato sauce on top of the white. That's just going to ensure that they cook a little bit more evenly. But it's a little bit finicky, and if you're trying to make a quick breakfast, I could totally understand why you would want to skip this step. I never skip this step though, because raw egg white is the worst texture on earth, and I hate it. Now, from this point forward, there's 2 options for cooking these eggs. The first one is to cook this over medium heat for about 2 minutes until you see the egg whites setting fully on the bottom. Then you'll put on a foil lid and cook it over low heat for another, let's say 3 minutes or so until the eggs are mostly cooked through. Or the second option is to take the pan and throw it into a preheated 400-degree oven and cook it for about 5 minutes. I slightly prefer the oven method because it adds a little bit of reduction and kind of roasts the tomato sauce on top, and that brings a little bit more flavor. And I think the texture of the eggs is just a little bit more interesting. That being said, not everybody wants to preheat their oven for a weekday breakfast, and the stovetop version is still very, very good. They're almost the same actually. Most people aren't gonna notice the difference. All right, that looks so good. After 4 to 5 minutes in the oven, you can see that the tomato sauce is reduced and jammy and nice and thick, and it's got a little bit of a roastiness on top, and most importantly, the freaking egg whites are cooked all the way. I cannot stress enough how gross shakshuka is if the egg whites aren't fully set. But these ones look excellent, and you can actually tell that the yolk underneath is gonna be a little bit runny because there's a little bit of bounce when I poke it. Now to garnish this, while this is still hot, I'm gonna add on a generous hit of crumbly, salty feta cheese. The residual heat from the sauce should melt this feta a little bit. Then I'm gonna hit that with a little bit of olive oil because always more oil. and then a strong pinch of herbs if you have them. These herbs are totally optional. I know most people watching this video definitely don't want to fuss with chopping or picking fresh herbs first thing in the morning, or let's be honest, most people don't even keep fresh herbs in the refrigerator on a regular basis, and that's totally fine. But if you want to substitute something that still has a herbal flavor but requires zero work, I would sprinkle on some dried oregano or a little bit of za'atar spice. Now to serve this, I'll just snug up a piece of toasty sourdough bread into the hot sauce and melty feta cheese. And there we go. That is a shockingly beautiful version of this dish, and it's even crazier that it only took 15 minutes start to finish. Wow. I am amazed at how delicious that is, truly. This quick and dirty version has basically everything that the slower cooked version has. Jammy, semi-sweet tomato sauce with really deep flavor, salty feta, well-cooked eggs, and bread to soak it all up. I'm so shocked that this only took 15 minutes start to finish. When I first had this idea of a quicker shakshuka, I wasn't really sure if it would work. This really is blowing me away. It's way better than I expected. I'd eat this for breakfast every single day.
Up next is a zippy little chorizo and egg taco that truly comes together in less than 10 minutes.
To make these tacos, I'm gonna start with 2 large eggs and just crack them into a dish real quick. Then I'll just hit them with a small pinch of salt, jump in with a fork, and just give them a quick scramble until they're nice and homogeneous. I like to do this ahead of time because this dish comes together super fast and it helps to have the eggs ready to go before you start cooking everything. But if you want to save yourself this extra dirty dish, you could definitely crack these eggs right into the hot pan alongside the chorizo later on. Just know that the results are going to be a little bit more rustic. Also, in general, whenever you can, I would say add your salt to your eggs about 5 minutes before you want to scramble them, because the salt actually changes the protein structure of the egg, which allows them to hold on to a lot more of their moisture, and it leads to a fluffier, more tender curd. Once I've got my eggs whisked up, I'm just gonna set those aside, then move over to a nonstick pan that I've got ripping over pretty high heat. Into the pan, I'll add a medium squeeze of oil. Then I'm gonna grab 75 grams of Mexican chorizo, drop that into the pan, and then come back and kind of smush it into a smash burger patty type shape. I want to get as much surface area of this sausage touching the hot pan and oil as I can. And then this next part is a little bit optional, but I like a crumbly sausage, so I'm gonna come back and kind of smush it up with my ground beef musher to get this patty broken into tiny little pieces that are about a pea-sized or even smaller. Also, I like to sizzle my chorizo over pretty high heat so that it actually takes on a deep brown sear. I think this browning is the secret to turning on or activating that signature savory, porky, tangy flavor that makes chorizo hit so hard. If you baby chorizo over low heat, it just kind of steams in the pan and it gets technically cooked through, but the chorizo ends up tasting flat and it lacks a certain zest. So I like to cook it hot. And after 2 minutes of cooking this over high heat, the chorizo has taken on a lot of nice golden brown color. It's been really well broken down and now it's sizzling in its own fat. From here, I'm gonna add my eggs into the chorizo and just start scrambling. I'm gonna keep this moving pretty much the whole time because I want the eggs to get broken down into small curds. And I wanna make sure that the chorizo and eggs get unified. If you let these eggs sit for too long in one place, they're gonna cook in a way that keeps the two separate, which I don't love. So I'm just gonna be stirring this constantly for about 45 to 60 seconds. Since the pan was so hot, the eggs are gonna cook super fast. And another really important reason to keep these moving is that eggs that get cooked over high heat for too long turn brown and they get really dry and tough and they have a really awful flavor. So it's really important just to make sure that these are in motion the whole time. And after a quick 45 to 60 second sizzle, the eggs are cooked all the way through. And now we have created a new thing called chorizo eggs. As in, it's just one word. We took 2 separate things that were really great on their own, then we combined them and made a new thing that is even better. I mean, just look at that. That's breakfast, baby. Now to serve this, I'll pile my egg mixture into 2 double layered tortillas. By the way, I heated up these tortillas before I cooked everything and just kept them hot in a tortilla warmer. But if you don't have one of these, you can also just keep them warm in a dish towel for the 5 minutes that it takes to cook everything. Next, I'll top with a little bit of store-bought tomatillo salsa, or the hot sauce of your choice. I prefer the Herdez brand for tomatillo salsa because it's not super thin like a lot of other store-bought tomatillos that I've had, and it's not aggressively sour. Then I'll crumble on some sort of dry, salty cheese like feta or queso fresco. I've got queso fresco here. And then finally, a little bit of chopped cilantro, only if you have it on hand, but it's totally not necessary. This is just a nice to have item. And that's just a beautiful taco that is a pure feast for the eyes. Like, you just know it's gonna be super flavorful by looking at it. I mean, look at it. Bouncy eggs, spicy porky sausage, bright fresh tomatillo salsa. It's just so good. Also, shout out to the double layer of tortillas here. I feel like most people would default to a single tortilla, but that's not great for two reasons. Number one is that a single tortilla is probably gonna rip when you take a bite and then the whole thing's gonna fall out, so it doesn't provide enough structure. And then number two, a single tortilla is probably just not gonna really bring enough substance to round this out into a full breakfast that's gonna make you feel full until lunch. So 2 tortillas is the move.
Finally, I want to show you guys a super fast breakfast dish that I ate when I was in Taiwan called Danbing.
Okay, before we start cooking the Danbing, I need to quickly bust out a little salty sweet condiment to serve alongside it. So for that, I'm gonna combine 25 to 30 grams of oyster sauce, or 2 tablespoons, 10 grams of soy sauce, or about 1 tablespoon, 3 grams of sesame oil, or about half of a teaspoon, and then 10 grams of water, which is also about a tablespoon. From here, I'm just gonna stir this until it's combined, and then give it a quick taste. Toasty sesame, sweet oyster sauce, and salty soy. It's a really nice, very simple condiment that would taste good on pretty much all food. It's very straightforward. And also, don't feel pressure to bust out your scale to measure all this stuff perfectly first thing in the morning. Instead, go by a simple ratio, which is 2 to 1 to 1 to half, which would be 2 parts oyster sauce to 1 part water, 1 part soy, and a half a part sesame oil. Once the sauce is made, I'm gonna prep some eggs for the Danbing. So I'm gonna crack 2 largies into a little dish here, and then hit it with just a little bit of salt. Then I'll drop in a strong pinch, or maybe 5 grams of chopped scallions per egg, and just jump in and whisk them up. Nothing serious here. We don't want a perfect French omelet style scramble. We just need them relatively broken down. Also, cut your scallions quite thin for this, because this whole dish comes together super fast, and if they're not thin, they're gonna end up standing out texturally and be kind of fibrous. Okay, at this point, I've got my eggs whisked up with scallions, I've got my sauce stirred together, and I've only been cooking for about 3 to 4 minutes. And at this point, I've got a nonstick pan heated over medium-high heat. You want this pretty hot. Next, I'm gonna add in a pretty generous amount of neutral oil, maybe a tablespoon and a half or more. In Taipei, the amount of oil that they use to fry these things is egregious. Once the oil's hot, I'm gonna drop in a flour tortilla and fry it on the first side for about 25 to 30 seconds, or until it's nice and crispy and deeply golden brown. Ooh, I love how it puffs like a pita when you fry it. Traditionally, these little flatbreads are made fresh to order by being fried on a flat top. So the flour tortilla became the next best move. It's fluffy, it's tender, and it crisps up beautifully and makes a perfect vehicle for scallion-filled eggs and sweet soy sauce. And after a quick rip on the back side, I'll just check it. Ooh, that looks really nice and crispy. It's maybe a little dark, but it's still gonna work. From here, I'm gonna throw it onto a paper towel lined sheet tray to drain off a little bit of the oil. Then I'll add in a quick another splash of oil here and fry off a second tortilla. I go for about 1 egg per tortilla in general, and I'm gonna make 2 portions here in total to make a nice hearty breakfast for 1 bri. And once I've got 2 of these things fried off, it's time to cook the eggs. By the way, shout out to this method in general. This is just a sick way to prepare flour tortillas. It gives you this flaky, crispy thing that is like puff pastry almost. At this point, there's enough oil left in this pan to cook these eggs properly. So I'm gonna take 1 of my eggs, pour it right into the middle, or try and keep it in the middle. There we go. And once it's just barely cooked like this, I'm gonna drop my tortilla right on top so that the two can fuse together. This way, the wet eggs stick to the flour tortilla and it creates unity that allows us to roll it up and keep things together once it's all folded. And after maybe 10 seconds here, I'm just gonna flip this over and then let the egg steam from the bottom up to cook it all the way through. That's gonna take maybe another 15 seconds in total. And then we're basically done. From start to finish, from where we're mixing the sauce to rolling up the danbing, couldn't be more than 7 minutes in total. This is truly a super, super fast breakfast. At this point, I'm just gonna roll this up by using a spatula and a fork so I don't burn myself. And then I'll just roll it up into a tidy little tube until it's looking kind of like a egg enchilada, something like that. Then I'll move it over here. Get just a touch more oil in the pan for my next egg. Drop that in. I'll let that sizzle for a minute, and then as soon as it's starting to get set up around the edges, I'll drop in my flour tortilla, press it a little bit to fuse it, then I'll cook it for about 15 seconds to finish setting up the eggs. Then once that's set, I'll flip it over and cook it on the back side for another 10 or 15 seconds. Rolling this up is super simple too. It doesn't have to be an exact science and it doesn't have to be super, super tight. The ladies at the breakfast shops in Taipei are really, really fast and super, super rustic about it. So it doesn't have to be this tidy, tight little thing. It's enjoyable pretty much no matter what. And there we go. 2 beautiful, flaky, golden brown egg roll-ups, basically. I don't know what you call it other than that. Now to serve, I'll cut these into little bites, then stack them up on a plate and drizzle with some of my thick, sweet soy sauce condiment. And that's a super simple breakfast that's pretty exotic, but also it just makes sense if you've eaten food before. Like, you don't have to know anything about Taiwanese food to know that fried flatbread with eggs and soy sauce is gonna work. Like, you just know that this is gonna taste good. Honestly, I'm shocked at how crispy that is. And it's like crispy in a super unique way that you can only get from like the outside of a croissant where you've got starch and fat at high temperature. It's like a very thin, brittle type of crispiness that's super satisfying. Combine that with some fluffy tortilla on the inside, some fried eggs, some scallions, and a little bit of sweet soy sauce, and you've got a very comforting, approachable, cozy dish that just makes an excellent breakfast. This dish might seem like it's exotic because it's from Taiwan, but these are flavors that literally everybody likes. It's super simple, it's super easy to make, and it hits so hard. Out of all the recipes in this video, I really hope you guys try this one. Let me know in the comments which one of these recipes you guys think might make it into your weekly rotation. And if you want to watch another video where I show you a bunch of recipes, I'll throw a link right here. Go ahead, click it. I'll see you there.